All right, y'all. So let's take a real first look at one of the flyweight fights I've been asking for. It's going down UFC 315 May 10th. Alexa Grasso is taking on Natalia Silva. Grasso, the former champion, taking on probably one of the most dangerous flyweights today right now in Natalia Silva, who's been on a nice run, who's looking more than ready for this shot. And this is on the same card, as y'all know, as Shevchenko versus Fior. And I believe it's right before the co-main event. So we got a nice little mini tournament going on right here. So yeah, taking a look at Alexa Grasso first. As y'all know, Alexa Grasso, she's coming off the loss of the Bullet after sharing the cage with her, 3 times now. And now she's also coming off of a broken leg this year, which that's kind of rough to get back into the mix too. So hopefully she's close to 100%. Looking back at Alexa Grasso's climb up to flyweight champion, it was a solid one. I got to say it was a solid one. It helped her grow into the weight, the path that she took to help her grow into the weight, help her grow into her body, and helped her work on her ground game, clinch game, all of that. She really earned my respect, with her move up to flyweight. She earned some good wins against Viviane Araújo, Macy Barber. And then, of course, she shocked everybody. She shocked the world with the finish over Shevchenko, which was still a competitive fight. And then she fought to a draw in the second fight, but got schooled in the third. But what I can take away from the first two fights is that Grasso definitely showed some growth. And when she's focused, she can hang with the best of them. And she's definitely tougher than I thought. I never really gave her credit as far as being like a killer in there. But when she fought Valentina those first two fights, I don't know what happened in the third fight, but when she fought her those first two fights, you could really see her hang in there and show that toughness and grit and almost get a finish in the second fight. The one thing about Alexa Grasso I can say is I just never really saw that complete fighter yet, even when she won the belt. When she was still kind of fighting tooth and nail to get the draw in the second fight, I said, you know what? I'm still not really seeing a dominant champion here, somebody that's going to keep the belt. And lo and behold, in the third fight, she loses it completely, 50-45. In my opinion, I still think Alexa Grasso kind of lacked that basic skill or two to help her keep the belt, which is takedown defense and wrestling. Her stand-up game and her boxing, that's all on point. Her jiu-jitsu is a standout as well. When she's on the ground, the way she's able to scramble and to maneuver and just kind of use her flexibility to her advantage, that's one of her standout things I noticed on the ground. But yeah, her jiu-jitsu is on point. It's just, that middle ground, that wrestling, which has always kind of been her problem. But yeah, overall, I think, Alexa Grasso is definitely a true flyweight now, and like I said, as she grows, you'll see her show that grit and even that killer instinct. But I just not too sure about where she left off, after that third fight. It was just too dominant of a loss, on her end. Looking at Natalia Silva, though, right now, man, Natalia Silva, she's on a mission. This girl, she's really targeting the belt and beyond, in my opinion. I think she has that type of style and energy that could earn the belt and possibly keep it for a few title defenses, which I'll talk about some other time. But that's what I see in her. I know I do these quadruple threat lists and triple threat lists, but out of the second group, I got to say that Natalia Silva is definitely the one that, to me, has the most potential to win this title eliminator and even, like I said, become champion. Like, I got to be real. Like, out of the 4 fighters I picked, who was it? Karine Silva, Natalia Silva, Barber, and Lipsky. They were all like fighters I could see reaching the top 5, but Natalia Silva is the one I could see actually getting the strap out of all 4 of them. No lie. I know a lot of people, they think that they haven't seen enough from her, but I think, to me, she's similar to Manon, like where her commitment is to her style and her IQ, and that's what makes her dangerous and difficult because, they have styles like for Natalia Silva, she has a style that some of these other women that haven't really seen before, and she's committed to that. She's not really one that's going to go in there and prove she's the better wrestler or grappler, but when things get tough, she can surprise you, I think. Even with her strength and her takedown defense. Even in the past, her getting some sneaky submissions before she got into the UFC. But, it's overall just her commitment to her style, like Manon Fior, wanting to prove that she's the best stand-up fighter and just having that IQ to, take the win and not try to please the crowd. That's kind of where she separates herself from these other fighters, right? And again, no matter what, she'll do what she has to do and not give anybody any room in there. And it's shown, 6 wins in a row against, 6 different styles. She's fought and controlled all of these fighters with her speed and her stand-up game, so you got to give her credit for that. You might call her one-dimensional, but I don't think she is. Like I said, I think she still has the ability to pull out some other little tricks under her sleeve. Because if you look at her pre-UFC career, there were other styles that she was using then. Now she just happens to stick more to her stand-up game. But yeah, looking at these two as far as how they match up, I definitely like this matchup. Like I said, this was on my wish list for 2025. Interesting matchup. I think these two match up well with their stand-up styles and their energy. We got a striker's paradise, y'all. We got a striker's paradise. Two contrasting stand-up fighters that make me wonder who's going to get the respect out of the other with their stand-up skills, with their striking skills. Like, who's going to wind up respecting who, and it's going to force them to a plan B and try to wrestle and take them down. Something like that. I'm kind of wondering what the situation is going to be here when it comes to who's going to be in control on the feet. I know we've seen Alexa Grasso use more tools on the way up. We've seen her, like I said, fight in the clinch, fight on the ground more, and wrestle a little bit, and, use her stand-up, kickbox, and all of that. And we've seen what she's capable of, even against a champion. But Natalia Silva, she's just so awkward, man, just so awkward and athletic that a lot of the ladies couldn't really handle that energy on her way up. I think Alexa Grasso will have a hard time finding the target, but I think her boxing IQ and her timing is much more polished than Silva. I think Grasso, she can use traps and she has slicker footwork to land combinations and even some hard counters when she gets into a rhythm. And that's what makes her tricky. Like, Grasso's not really just all athleticism and speed, like just little gifts here. Like, she's really technical. She's like a good technically sound offensive boxer. So that's one of the things that could be a benefit here. But again, Silva, she's always moving and throwing. Not a lot of heavy power punches, but it's her speed that kills. It's her speed that surprises. And if she catches you with a head kick, it could be over. So when you look at Silva's ability to throw leg kicks and body kicks, it's going to make Grasso an easy target if there's some leg issues here. That's one thing I got to think about. Like, that's one thing that makes this fight kind of a bad matchup for Grasso, is the fact that, she just had a broken leg this year. Like, how is she going to move on it? She going to be front foot heavy. Is that going to be a target for Natalia Silva to, chew up that lead leg, go to the body with some body kicks like Valentina did a few times, and then maybe set up a head kick? You just never know, right? There's a lot of things going here. So if Grasso isn't guarding that body well, she could be eating a lot of body kicks here. So I think this fight really depends on who gets into their rhythm and who gets going from there and makes the other fighter overly cautious. So while they're being cautious, if they're worried about the counter shots coming or the speed coming, they're gonna kind of fall behind here. And then that fighter might choose to get some takedowns here, just to kind of cap off every round. So we'll see, man. We'll see how Silva reacts to Grasso's timing and power. And we'll see how Grasso reacts to fighting a new opponent after almost 3 years. Because that's another thing we got to factor in. Grasso hasn't faced a different style since 2022, October 2022 against Viviane Araújo. So yeah, it's been since on her way up. Since then she was fighting Valentina 3 times, which that's a tough task right there. But this here is a completely different stand-up style than Valentina. A lot of movement, a lot of chaotic movement here. I think Natalia Silva, the biggest test here is, can she move for 3 rounds against, somebody that is going to be putting a lot of pressure on her and throwing combinations, So yeah, I'm really looking forward to this one. There's a lot of questions answered about this fight, but as we get closer, there's some other breakdowns I want to do on it. Just wanted to kind of do a little first look here again. I know I did the announcement video, but yeah, just looking at how Grasso matches up. I think, Grasso could have success with some boxing against a kickboxer or taekwondo fighter here. It all just depends on her timing and her jab, because even looking back at this Scatzese fight and Chanel Dyer, Chanel Dyer, the Muay Thai fighter, she was getting timed and out jabbed by Scatzese, who was coming in with that heavy jab, heavy boxing style, So we'll see how Natalia Silva reacts to somebody who's a little bit more technically sound than her last few opponents and has a lot of polish to her. But yeah, definitely a much needed fight here for both fighters to see where Grasso stands, and for Natalia Silva to see if she is championship material. All right. But guys, let me know in the comment section what y'all think of this fight coming up. Got a couple more first looks to do. Y'all know which fights I'm talking about. Make sure y'all hit the like and subscribe. Combo Breaker 99. I'm out. Peace.